Hello, how is everyone doing? Our weekly live streams, here we are again, Tuesday afternoon, UK time. Might be morning if you're over in America, might be a bit later if you're a bit further east of us. Wherever you are though, welcome. This is always good fun to hang out with you guys. Yeah, we're just going to hang out and do some, well, not really composing this time, because somebody pretty talented has already done the composing for us, a Mr. John Powell. So we're going to be taking a look today at a short section from How to Train Your Dragon. Pretty good soundtrack. In fact, one of my favorite soundtracks probably over the last 15 years now, I guess. And it's obviously recently been re-released as a live action film with slightly modified version of the soundtrack, but all those great themes and melodies that we love. So we're going to be taking a little look at probably the classic track in this soundtrack, Test Drive. I think it's now called something slightly different on the new soundtrack. We're going to take a little look, we're going to mock it up, and we're going to focus today a little bit on orchestration. We've sort of talked about orchestration in our streams, but today we're going to talk in a bit more detail about orchestration and why composers may make certain choices and how they may impact the sort of tone and the style and the feel. And this is probably one of his, best, certainly most famous and most well-loved scores. And for good reason. It's just, it's a great film and it's a great soundtrack and it's a marriage made in heaven. Sometimes you just get a composer and a film, they come together and it's, you just can't imagine anybody else ever having done it. And this is one of those. Here's my DAW setup today. These are the sketches. You can see I've done a lot of sketches because I wanted to split all this out so that we can move quickly between the parts. It's all piano at the moment. You're probably going to recognize this, although it's going to sound a bit weird at the moment. But as we work through this, we will hopefully make it sound less weird and more like the piece that we all know and love. So here is the sketch that I have so far, and I've split it over multiple lines to make it easier for us to take apart. There it is. Now, it sounds a little bit weird at the moment. If you hear it like this, you may be forgiven for thinking, I'm not sure that's all right. I promise you, it is actually all right. Might be one or two mistakes in there, but it's pretty much everything from the score. It's a really interesting thing. Something that I sort of realized as I was going through it over the last day or two is that I think the reason this piece is so great, it's beautifully written, but I think it's actually what's so great about this piece of music is that it's really a pop song, right? I know that sounds weird, but it's not written like symphonic orchestral music. It's like a pop song, right? The chord sequence is this kind of C sharp minor, then this A, then we have this B, and then to E, and then back. It's all these really great pop chords, right? It's like, it sounds weird, but it's like you could make this into a ballad if you wanted to. It's got this beautiful quality to it, or it could be a punk song. It could be like Green Day or Blink-182, right? It's like if you sped this up, change the rhythm a bit, but you could pretty much take it, that's like, you could make this into a vocal melody or something. But I think it's really clever on the part of John Powell that he sort of approached this with that melodic sensibility. This is not symphonic writing with complex chords and harmonies. And, it's not done that way. It's done really simply, really boldly, like a pop song with that kind of melodic sensibility, but obviously rendered orchestrally, which I think is really interesting. Where do we start with this? Well, I think we're probably going to start with the violins. I'm just going to solo our string section and we'll listen to that by itself. So I'll play the whole thing, but you get the idea. We have these high strings that are playing these kind of arpeggiated, broken chords, which really lend a sense of movement to the piece. They're sort of propelling the piece along with the woodwinds, as you'll see. And then the brass are really anchoring the melody and giving us that power. So maybe we'll just start by putting the strings in. That's always a good place to start. And then we'll see where we are at. Nice. Beautiful. So that's what we have going on here. I'm going to just do some sort of velocity modifications here. But I'm keeping it all relatively even, because if I tried to do it too much dynamic like this, it'd sound like this. That's not really what this piece is like. This is, as we said, a tutti piece. So everything's playing at a relatively even fortissimo kind of dynamic here. I'm going to copy this up to our spiccato first. I'm going to rename it as we go. Nice. What we're getting is we're getting the kind of crispness of Array, which is a bit of a drier library, a bit of a more modern symphonic sound. And then we're getting the lovely sort of bloom and hall and kind of nice rich sound of Dolce. So this is what our second violins are doing. So this is what our violas are doing. If you butcher this work, I will never forgive you. I don't think I'm capable of butchering it, purely because it's John Powell, not because of me. I can butcher anything, but I've relied on the master, and I'm staying in my lane, and I think it's going to be fine. I pretty much just copy what he's done, and now I'm putting it on some really nice libraries. You can start to hear this stuff builds up. Nice. So you can see that dive down in the octave. It's the same note, it's an E, but dive down into the octave just gives it more power on that second pass of this. Beautiful way of just creating more drama before we go into the big main theme. So we don't have bagpipes in Audio Imperial Library, but I do have bagpipes on my computer. I think these are supplied by Native Instruments. And there are bagpipes in the score. Well, these are actually Elam pipes, so they're Irish bagpipes. That's what they play, and they're quite in the background, but they really add a lot of character. If you've seen the film, if you know the kind of tone of the film, these touches just add this kind of folk Celtic-like character. Let's get the high woodwinds in now. So they are just providing sort of drone-like quality, and I'm just going to indicate, usually when players play, not always, but the default would always be to sort of hit a note with a bit of attack and a bit of force, and then as the note goes further along, just back off a little bit. So it has this kind of a shape. You can see the envelope I have here, a higher beginning and then coming down. Automaton would be superb. I agree. I think it would be how to train your automaton. That's maybe a whole maestro course there. How to train your automaton. Would you guys buy? $899, 46 hours of teaching. And these woodwinds will sound better when we add some reverb. You can hear just nice low. Let's do the trombones. So you can see it's interesting in the score here, we start off with these low trombones, and then in the second blast, John Powell uses the trombones spread out more and a higher register. Just again, combination of two things. Everything's diving an octave, all the low stuff, the basses and things like that. Some of the other stuff is going up. It's just spreading the range out and making everything sound bigger. Let's maybe put these on Poseidon as well. Nice, they're giving us that roomier sound. Nice. So we've got this tuba. See how that sounds just huge, that second statement of this big E chord, where everything dives down and up. We have this in the trumpets, which we will definitely put in now. And we'll use staccatissimo. Nice. Let's have a listen to what these sound like. Nice. That sounds good. Might use some envelope. See how that envelope's just shortening the release? So it's really, because we're using this as our kind of drier sound, I'm really taking the tail out of it. So it sounds a lot more focused. I think that's good enough now. We'll keep going and then we'll come back and do anything that we want to do when it comes to things like, you know, percussion and stuff. What I think we want to do now is get this this melody going. So we'll put this on the horns to start off with, because the horns are really what we hear, and we're going to use Talos. Let's just try the sustains and see. Yeah, well, maybe just keep it sustained for now. Let's just try those as Mikado shorts. Oh, got to remember, I got to do the range for each one of these, so. Yeah, that might work. Nice. Legato's not as prominent in brass as you might sometimes think, but little lines like that, descending lines, ascending lines, you know, when you're going in step, definitely would be legato all day long, I think. With the strings, this is what we have. It's going to sound good. Sound a bit weird at the moment, but this is what I love about doing mock-ups of other people's stuff. Like, you put stuff in, you're like, oh, I don't really understand how that's going to work, and why is that sounding like that? When you put it all together, you're going to see how this works. These are double with trumpets, and the trumpets are the secret sauce here. This is what our trumpets do. What I'm going to do is just mute those at the end, because I'll probably put them on a different track. Okay, so we got... First thing we need to do is make sure that that's a sustain and not a legato. Although we will make that first one legato, why not? Beautiful. Just these little moments where you get these fourths and these fifths and things. Just sounds so cool. Sorry, by the way, guys, I'm sorry for humming. I realize I do that quite a lot now. No, we don't want it to be too pop, you know, because that's just a bit intense. Again, we'll probably layer these either with Poseidon or with themselves. Nice. That's going to sound good, I think. One of the mock-up mistakes I see quite a lot, which is just easily fixed, is just tiny gaps between notes. There's no way a player, unless they were doing a literal legato, there's no way a player could play each of these notes and not have a tiny little distinction between them. And it feels naturally kind of a bit synthy and computerized. With a little bit of a gap, it's only a small difference, but it makes a big difference. Just helps separate those notes, which is what you would expect to hear. What we're going to want to do is these trumpets play more of a harmonic role here, because if I remember rightly, the high strings take over. And I may not make that staccato. We'll see. But because this is more of a supporting role, I may put the staccato in Poseidon, and then we'll have a bit of both. Otherwise, we get that kind of, even if I take the velocity down, it just feels a bit... We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. A little bit more of a gap there, because I'm going to say after a phrase, after what we've been playing here, this would be a moment where the players would just take a little breath. These work, but we're getting there. We're getting there. I haven't used Poseidon as much as Jaeger. As you might imagine, it's a newer library. I mean, I've used it a bit. Sounds incredible to me. But yeah, this is sort of my first time really digging into some of these core articulations in as much detail. So we're going to be blending these. What we're going to want to do is bring these up. We're going to want everything playing near enough maximum. Let's play these together now and see what they sound like and mix them to taste. Nice. Something that I quite often do with Talos is just scoop a tiny bit of the middle out, brighten it up a bit. It's just something I do most of the time. So it's a really subtle thing, but Talos has this slightly closer sound, which gives it a bit more of a roomier sound. Fantastic for certain uses, fantastic for this too, but sometimes when you want it to sound a bit more embedded into a brass ensemble, just to take a little bit of the mid out will help it just sit in. So take the mute out. Trumpets sound muted. They could well be. Let me have a little look. Yes, you're right. Muted sustains. That would make sense. So this is me not knowing. There we go. I agree. Free the trumpets. Although, hey, I like that muted trumpet sound, right? I'm going to go... Sometimes a blend of a muted trumpet and a non-muted trumpet can make it sound... I don't know, right? If you listen to a lot of film soundtracks, the trumpets have this really particular, beautiful sound that sometimes doesn't get captured by some libraries. And sometimes, I don't know what it is, but it's a slightly boxy but really beautiful cinematic sound that sometimes is missed. These trumpets sound great, though. So I'm going to double these Talos with the Jaeger 6 horns. Sounds a bit weird, but I think it's going to work. And I will explain why. It's just the best of both worlds, essentially. So let's just listen to these. Same thing here. And maybe use portato for these. Nice. Yeah, that sounds good to me. Yeah, this is starting to come together nicely, I think. I will just separate those two. See how you get the kind of slightly closer, more intimate sound of Jaeger. Intimate's not really the right word. There's still a huge brass section. But then with Talos, you just get that full, rich. Together. Nice. Let's move on to our trombones and all that good stuff and get some of this harmony in. Sounds a bit weird again, but together. And then with everything else. We're getting there. Bit of work to do with those, but that's fine. And this is all going to be pretty loud. And we're just going to copy that over to the low brass. So really nice, simple stuff in the low brass all together. So. Okay, let's go and fix up the rest of these violins. So we have this going on. This is where the violins change. Essentially, the trumpets and the French horns are playing the melody for the first part, and then the trumpets become a little bit more harmonic in nature, and the violins take over with more of a kind of soaring melody. Beautiful. This is another thing that happens often in How to Train Dragon, and it's just a great piece of symphonic writing, is melody and counter melody, or sort of call and response. You have a beautiful example of this here. It's sort of like a call, then a response in the upper strings, these high first violins. Now, a lot of libraries have it so that if you have the same note play, it will just essentially re-trigger the exact same note, and it'll sound a little bit what we might call machine gun-like. It'll sort of sound like the same notes being played over and over. With Dolce, we have these beautiful re-triggers. So they've been sampled in a way that if you play the same note, but you use the sustain pedal, it'll trigger a different version of the same note, which gives it this lovely natural quality. And how you do that is using the sustain pedal. So if you have a sustain pedal, you're playing this in live, you can just put your foot on the sustain pedal and that will give you what you need. If you don't have a sustain pedal, or you're doing what I'm doing and copying and pasting this in, you can just use these moments. You can see here's the one note, and then we have the same note here, and then we have a tiny gap. But what I want to do is use my sustain here to make sure that I play the same note, but I trigger the rebow, so I get a really nice natural sound. The second violins do something different to the first violins at this point. So we take this, in fact, yeah, take that. These are all different notes, so I can just overlap these to ensure, like I said, I think you don't need to do that these days, but I'm just old-fashioned and do it. So that's what happens in the strings, and it just creates this nice moment. Our viola's doing something that's quite common in orchestral scoring, which is essentially just supporting the trombones. So I'm just going to show you with the trombones what this does. There's a sort of top endness to strings and a nice fizzy texture to strings that just help even trombones or, you know, big brass instruments cut through a bit more. They really help to fill out that middle texture, which is sometimes... So we have the cellos divided in the score, and they're just creating this beautiful, rich... Now, what I'm probably going to do here is back that off at that point there. I'm going to take these and I'm going to add them to a cello legato. So this sounds a bit weird on its own because this is a little bit fast for what Dolce is usually intended for. Sounds a bit weird, but listen how these sound together when this is just mixed in. Do you see how it just adds without you just missing? Sounds a little bit too Marcato, a bit marked, a bit separate. Okay, let's get these basses in because then we're sort of done with the strings at this point. Basses divide at some points. So you can see where that line changes, that's where the basses divide. That's just good orchestration. That's an orchestrator that's looked at the piece and said, cellos have moved off the root notes, so how are we going to fill them in? We'll just divide the basses. And strangely, sometimes divided instruments don't sound weaker. You might think, oh, if you have 8 basses and then suddenly you have 4 on one note, 4 on another, it's going to sound weak and flimsy. That's often not the case, you know, because of the sort of psychoacoustic effect of these things. Cool. We're starting to get there, I think. What I am going to do is I'm going to double these first violins in Dolce with a Rea. See, that's bringing out all that lovely kind of lush sound. Again, I'm pretty sure there's a bit of a mixing trick in here because this is all just on the first violins in the score. There's no way those first violins are competing with all the rest of the brass and everything else in a true orchestral setting. So my suspicion is they've, you know, using a bit of beautiful mixing, jiggery pokery, but that's again very common in scoring setups because, you know, scores are all about the final result. They're not intended to be played live, but it's all been orchestrated really well as well to make sure the brass dip down at this point. Let's maybe put our woodwind shorts in. So we have this happening in the woodwind shorts. Now I'm probably just going to use the ensemble patch for this. Where the violins take over the melody, as you can see, the violins are all about that line in the first half of this. They change here. The woodwinds take over. So really clever orchestration again. It's all about thinking, what can we do? What instruments doing what sections are doing what? Let's get our low woodwinds in. They are really just playing root notes. The oboes are playing the melody. Oboes playing melodies in tutti sections is quite common because the oboes have a piercing tone. We're not going to worry about programming these because, again, it's more about filling in this brass. And I'll just show you what happens at the end, which is really nice. And this is what we're talking about with counter melodies. So these woodwinds do this at the end. Really nice writing there. I'm going to use the solo flute. Really nice. The melody plays 3 times in each group, and each time it's slightly sort of different, different ranges, different kind of technique. Just sounds great. Strings. Beautiful. That's great orchestral writing there. Just this kind of call and response, each time slightly different. And then it just builds up this great big climax then. Cool. Let's add in some of our atonal percussion. Nice. Okay. Just going to quickly write these rolls in. And I'm just going to do a little bit of mixing with this again, because again, we're talking about a bigger room where you'd hear more of the highs and lows and less of the mids. Something more like that. And I'm also just going to add a generous hit of Seventh Heaven to our percussion, put them in the back of the room. This is the kind of score that's all, well, it probably hasn't all literally been recorded in the same space at the same time, but it has that feel, right? It's not like a big modern hybrid score where you have all this kind of different stuff going on. This sounds pretty natural. Yeah, I think that's going to work. Start by listening to it with. And then with our percussion above, the whole thing is a bit like this. With everything else. Just do a really simple technique of just filtering this. Not too much, but lose some of that tss at the very top. Push this back in the mix. We use the near hole, or medium near. One more thing very quickly here, and then we're sort of nearly done, really. At least for what we can get done today. A lot of cinematic music these days has sub bass in it. I'm not sure whether this does, but it certainly sounds at time like it has some of that stuff. Just adds a lot of really nice low end. And in terms of brass, going back to the brass, sometimes low, either trailer brass as they call it, or a sub bass, a kind of Reese sub bass, can really help to gel the brass together. So that would probably be an octave higher. See how that's adding this kind of low end weight? So that's a good technique. I'll very quickly show you how I've made this. There you go. It's my little preset in a free thing called Vital. It's basically just one sine wave, 2 saw waves, a little bit of filter. I've upped the number of voices and created some detune. At the end, we have the bagpipes back. Really nice. We also have this little dulcimer, which is in, oh, where did my dulcimer go? Where did it go? What happened? I must have put it in my violins somewhere. There it is. We'll just leave it there for now. Really beautiful little dulcimer. Just adds so much to that ending. Nice. And then what I'm going to do is just add, I've got this free plugin that I use sometimes called Low End or Love End, depending on how you want to pronounce it, that I might just try and add here. So it's adding a lot of really nice, like low subby. A little goes a long way with this, so you don't want to use it too much. And I would probably actually just take out a little bit of 2-3K again from this. And as a final thing, you can add some saturation to brass, which is what I've done here. Saturation distorts, but in a very musical way, the brass. There's nothing better than brass recorded on tape. If you listen back to the old Star Wars stuff, a big part of the sound of Star Wars is brass on tape. It naturally compresses. It adds all these beautiful distorted frequencies, but very musical distortion. Brass on tape just sounds so huge, so compressed, but in a very musical way. We can't quite capture that here, but we're sort of trying to do that, you know. So I've added this tape thing here. You can use almost anything if you've got Decapitator or some kind of tape emulation, as long as you use it subtly, but it just adds a lot of really nice kind of harmonics and stuff. So yeah, I think it's pretty good for a couple of hours work, you know. I was obviously given a head start by the fact all the good stuff was done by John Powell, but yeah, for a couple of hours work, we've done not too bad. So let's have a final listen to the result. So I hope that's been useful. I hope we've learned something along the way in terms of how John Powell's put this great piece together. As I said, I think the key to this piece compositionally is that it's almost like a pop song or almost like a punk rock song. I know it sounds a bit weird, but if you really listen to it and break it down, the melody and the chords, this is something that you could hear as a kind of ballad or as a pop punk thing. He's really got that great melodic modern sensibility, but obviously he's done all the traditional orchestral stuff to get it there in terms of the violin rhythms, in terms of the change between melodies, you know, from horns to trumpets to woodwinds and things like that. Obviously, you've got these great textures supporting the main elements. You've got this huge brass, and then you've got some really nice kind of percussion to drive it forward. Kind of a nice blend of modern sensibilities, certainly melodically and harmonically, but with traditional orchestral techniques. And it's just a great score. If you haven't heard the score before, listen to the whole thing. And as I say, you can buy the sheet music. Really, really worth analyzing if you're into that kind of thing, because there's a lot of great techniques there. And hopefully we covered something today. So we'll head back to just chatting. As I said, hopefully this has been really useful for you guys. It's been great to speak to you. Sorry if I've been a little bit out of the mix here and there, but I saw you guys having good conversations. I'm going to go back and check them out. And hopefully, yeah, this has given you some ideas of how you might mock some of this stuff up, and also how great composers like John Powell use orchestral forces to create nice, big, full, rich sounds. Happy composing. If you want to share anything with us in the Discord, please do. We always love to hear what you guys are writing. And I shall see you next Tuesday. Have a good day wherever you are. Take care, guys.